Thank you very much, Sana. Welcome. Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. This is Luis Torrent. I'm a circular economy specialist and also climate change expert. I've been working around circular economy for a few years now. As Sana mentioned, circular economy is a trending topic, let's say, in the environmental and sustainability field. It's been pushed by the European Union very hard, and it's being progressively included in the regulations. There are a number of examples. There's a Circular Economy Action Plan. There have been two versions in Europe. There's been the due diligence regulations, which now apply to companies that operate in Europe and also outside Europe, but import products in Europe. There's this ESPR, which is the Eco-Design Sustainability Regulation that affects a number of products, and there are the digital product passports coming in that they will be starting its application next year. So those are circular economy related policies and regulations that will be, in some cases, they are voluntary, but eventually they will become mandatory. So the sooner your corporations start implementing these principles, the sooner you will be more competitive, more environmentally friendly, and more regulatory compliant. So I'm going to share a brief presentation today about what this circular economy is, how can we save waste. Circular economy is not only about waste, because this is kind of a misconception, but it's one of the phases of circular economy. I'm going to share my screen. Let me see if you can see my presentation. So, first question to ask, why change? Why do we need to implement circular economy? We've seen in the poll that Sana introduced to you all that one applicant mentioned that they are fully implementing circular economy, which is great, but most of the companies are just starting to explore or in the middle process. But there's a very relevant report that's coming in every single year at the beginning of the year, beginning of January, which is the Global Circularity Gap. And the last edition, a few months back, mentioned that the world is 6.9% circular. What does this mean? This means that we extract some resources from the earth, from nature, we process, we use those resources, and then we dispose those resources without recirculating them. So reusing them in a way that we keep a loop, a closed loop all the time. So it means take, use, and dispose, and then we no longer use those resources, and those are wasted directly, whatever it is in the form of solid waste or liquid waste or emissions gas waste. So this means that only around 7% of the resources are recirculated. This is a drop as compared to 2015, which was 9.1. It was not very high, but it was higher than now. So we're going backwards in terms of circularity. So as you can see in the image below, the circular economy is doing these studies. In circular economy, we don't usually talk about waste. We talk about value loss. That's a concept that most of the companies understand, because value can take many forms. And for companies, one of the most important forms is economic value. So this value loss is being lost across the value chain, whatever it's upstream, during the midstream, in the use, or downstream, once the product is out in the market and being used. So as I explain now, this 6.9% of linearity, it's the reflection of what we say that we live in a current linear model. So we extract resources from the earth, we produce some products or services, we distribute, we sell those, we consume, and then we dispose. And a few years back, we started recycling them, which is a part of the circular economy. But there are many other ways to valorize those resources, but recycling, which is what we have in mind. Recycling is one of the lower layers of circular economy. And one of the consequences of this linear model is these images that you see below. Some big dumps. This one is in Indonesia. These big chimneys with gas emissions. We are in a climate crisis because of this precise linear model. So the question to ask is, waste management historically was asking the question, how do we manage waste after it's generated? So the tendency was, our goal is to recycle. But this is no longer the question anymore. So the circular economists ask, how to prevent value loss across the full system? So we have a product that has a value. So imagine if we could say that this waste has some economic value. What if we could monetize this and say, well, we're losing thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars because this is wasted. What if we could valorize this waste somehow? So this is the difference between what we call the linear economy, the recycling economy, which is the one that we are facing now. We talk about, we take the products, the resources, we make products, we use them, and then now the paradigm until now has been we recycle them. So we remake things. But recycling usually means decomposing, shredding the products that are wasted, and then we minimize and when we use only the inputs to make a new product. But there are many other ways that we can keep or increase the value of those products. For example, by a circular economy approach, which means returning the product, reusing the product, repairing the product, recycling, or even not consuming that product, or consuming that product in a different way. So here is where a circular economy comes in. Circular economy, it's all about retaining value at the highest level possible as long as possible. So there are three principles in circular economy. The first one, eliminate. It's very difficult to fully eliminate, but the idea is to eliminate as much as possible waste and pollution. So the products to consume, the processes that are implemented in our companies need to be designed to prevent this waste generation and avoid the generation of byproducts. And if these byproducts are generated, how we can reuse them, recirculate them, even in our internal processes. Second principle, one of the most important ones, keep the products and materials and energy and water in use as long as possible. So goods are precious things. The same thing for energy, same thing for water. So let's design products that can last longer, that can be repaid, that can be disassembled, and ultimately recycled. And if possible, not be wasted or disposed. And the last one is regenerate our natural systems. We're harming our systems by this extractive economy. So the least thing that we could do is to keep these systems healthy, because the natural systems are the base, the fundamental base, whether they are the forest, whether they are the oceans, whether they are the mountains. We take many resources from these systems, so we need to keep them healthy. So linear versus circular economy, where value is lost. There are some examples here. For example, if we are not managing our orders inventory properly, we might overspecify our products, we might overorder. So then the likelihood of generating waste is higher. If products are damaged, of course, there's always a little percentage of products that can be damaged. That happens in every company, even in the distribution. So preventing or diminishing this means less waste. Packaging, it's also a big concern usually, because it's usually a one-time packaging design, and usually discarded. Products arrive home, arrive to the customer, to the company if it's B2B business, and then this is discarded. How can we take advantage of that? If the assets are underused or replaced early or poorly maintained, that maintenance is usually an often underwatched aspect, and it's very important. If products cannot be repaired, and here's where the European Union is pushing hard, the products need to be repaired, the products need to be reused to some extent, or graded or disassembled. For example, mobile phones, they used to be different before, so you could change your battery, but at some point, many companies decided to embed the battery, so if you disassemble the battery, the warranty was lost. So now, not anymore. The European Union, it's made it very clear, the mobile phones need to be disassembled so they can be repaired. And also mixing products, the simpler the product is, the simpler it will be to reuse its product and disassemble. And recovery routes need to be planned accordingly before disposal. This is a very important example and graph. It's called the value hill. It's the life cycle of every product or even service. So usually you start with extracting some raw materials, you take those into manufacturing, assembly lines, You produce the product, you market it, you put it into the retails or distribution, they reach homes or the businesses, and they are used. So here is this uphill, the value is created. We start from maybe some minerals that have lower value, or some food products, some apples or wood usually has lower value, and the higher we climb this little hill, the higher the value is. Usually the top of the hill is when the value is used. And here is what we need to retain the value, because after use, we start this big downhill where we call the post-use. And here is where we start, it becomes waste and it becomes value loss because the product is no longer used and often is disregarded and discarded. And then the value is lost. So the principle is to keep the value as close as to the top as possible. So the value is in its maximum quantification as possible. And then is when we have different circular strategies to prevent this downhill, to keep the products on top as long as possible. So to design this circular supply chain, we need to design those to retain value. So how typically a circular supply chain looks like? So you need to follow every single step in the process, from procurement to design. So design is usually a very important step in the process because design defines the procurement needs, and they design the operations and then design the use and how this product is going to be used after, what's going to happen to this product after it's being used. So procurement, design, operations, logistics, and reverse flows. Reverse flows is once the product is disregarded, is no longer used, what happens with it. So this is what we call reverse logistics. We take it back to somewhere so we can reuse the product, repair it, or we can reuse some of the parts. And data reporting are very important because with this data and this reporting, it's not just a regulatory requirement, but it's also information that is valuable for the company. So the first step in the process, you need to map the flows. So once you know every single step in your value chain for your product, you need to understand what are the flows that are coming in, what materials are you using to produce that product, what energy, is it the form of gas, is it the form of fuel, is it the form of electricity, is it renewable, non-renewable, and what comes out. Is there any waste in the upstream supply, in the logistics, in the core operations, in the packaging, or in the use phase? So you need to map all these flows during the life cycle of the product. And typically, that's beyond your company boundaries. This includes your suppliers, and this includes distribution, and this includes the use of the product. So you can choose what's your boundary, but this is something that will not be getting into details too much in detail today. So what flow should be mapped? We start with materials, from raw materials, ingredients, components, spare parts, construction materials, also products, meaning co-products and byproducts, any finished goods, equipment needed, assets needed to produce your products or services, like furniture or textiles, machinery, etc. Also the packaging. We have different kinds of packaging, from primary to secondary, including pallets, including containers, this tertiary packaging, and the transport packaging. There's a lot of packaging involved in the product distribution. And then we need to map all these waste and losses, from scraps, residues, damaged goods, returns, expired stock. It seems like a simple task, but depending on the processes, it can be a little bit more complex than that. So it's better to plan ahead and get as much data as possible. So when we have the flows clearly identified, here's when we identify the hotspots, the value leakage. And these hotspots include some priority areas. What's the most important value leakage? Though the value leakage, to identify that, we need to ask some questions. So what are the most significant material flows that my company has, that my production line has? Is there any avoidable waste or loss? Can we be more efficient in the processes in terms of water or electricity use? Are there any high costs associated? Because usually circular economy practices mean economic savings, not only environmental compliance and environmentally friendly actions, but also economic savings. Less waste means economic competitiveness. There's also higher environmental relevance. If we have some toxic products in our product lines, these need to be prioritized. Is it feasible to intervene? Is it potentially feasible? And then what's the influence by the organization and partner? It's something that it's in our core operations, or it depends on a supplier, and then it's outside our boundaries. So here, this triple circle that you can see, the priority zone is where there's a higher environmental impact, there's high value loss and financial loss, or economic loss, and high mass volume. That's the spot we need to look at. And we start by asking some questions. Let's follow the mass. With the mass comes the money, and then comes the impact. So we follow this route, and we see what priority actions we need to take, what priority processes or flows. Something like this heat map matrix. So we make this simple graph, let's say, with the frequency of materials use, where material loss happens in our production line, and what's the associated cost, economic cost, which is something that we should be able to do it pretty easily, and what's the environmental impact. For that, we could do it, simplify it in a simplified way, or we can undertake some life cycle assessments, and then this is something that in European Union, it's being requested more and more. So we prioritize where volume is high, costs are significant, environmental are relevant, and intervention is feasible. There are some examples across several sectors that are specifically targeted to the GCC context in key supply chain sectors like construction, real estate, hospitality and tourism, energy, petrochemicals, retail, distribution, logistic hubs. I know there's a lot of information, and please, if you have any questions, please drop your questions in the Q&A box, and I will address them later. Unfortunately, you cannot intervene in this webinar. So, for example, as I mentioned before, in construction or real estate, over-ordering of the construction materials chosen, what kind of materials are we choosing? It's an important decision because not always the cheapest products are the ones that are going to last longer. We need to think about disassembly or demolition waste. In hospitality, food waste, it's often a big concern in GCC, but also in touristy areas. I live in Spain. We don't have that many buffet-driven hospitality models, but I've been in the Caribbean several times, and there are lots of losses because of this buffet model. But there are ways to avoid this. So how can we prevent this? By not using single-use amenities, look into how the textile and linen, in energy petrochemicals, which is something important also in the GCC context, very, very important. We need to look at recirculating some waste. For example, I know that gas sometimes can be recirculated to produce the heat loss, can be recirculated to produce steam, and that can produce electricity that can be used in the facilities. In retail, this packaging is a big concern because there's a lot of packaging lost. And in the logistics hubs, there's some single-use pallets that are still being used, scraps, damaged equipment, and there are a set of circular opportunities that are listed here that you can undertake to prevent and keep that value as high as possible, as explained before. This is, I'm not going to get into details, but we're going to deliver a course next month in which I will be explaining in full detail all these 6 processes that are part of the definition of a strategic action plan, not only in waste, but in the wider circular economy aspects, from mapping the flows to drafting your actions in a sensible and feasible action plan that it's well coordinated, the stakeholders are well identified, and it's feasible to implement. And I'm heading to the end of the presentation. So this is one example of a solution in the logistic hubs. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but if you work in logistics, probably you heard of this. So pallets are more and more non-single use. So it's becoming very popular also globally, but also the GCC context. Reusable pallets are on the rise and very, very high. And in Saudi Arabia, in UAE, in other countries, this is on the rise. GCC context is a big hub for logistics globally, so it makes sense to reuse those pallets because the company is not using them. Some companies own these pallets, but why owe something if you could just pay for use? So that's a typical circular scheme from circular economy. You pay per use. So for example, renting models. So you no longer own a facility or a warehouse or a car, because you could pay per its use. And usually it's more economically competitive. You pay basically for what you need. You don't need to pay for everything. You don't need to pay for the rental, the accessories that are coming with this, like insurance schemes or damages that can be included in a package. So ownership models are something that are relevant for circular economy models. So this is one example. CHEP is one of the biggest companies when it comes to rental of pallets. So the manufacturer rents these pallets, and they are used in distribution. They even head to the retailer. They are going back, and it's a circular, completely circular model. And here's an example. This is literally next door to my house. This is a shop. It's a Carrefour. It's a small shop that it's next to my house. And precisely last week, I saw these pallets and I wanted to have a closer look. And this is a French company. You can see two models of pallets here, the red one and the blue one. And coincidentally, the blue one is CHEP, is this company. And the red one is LFP, which is a French company that also delivers this very same model, which is about renting pallets and reusing them. So if the pallets get damaged, you don't need to pay for extra pallets. So the company is repairing them or providing a new pallet because you don't own those. So you don't need to worry about this. You just pay for a service, and then it's becoming so popular, even lighting. Philips is delivering lighting as a service. So if some bulbs break in your warehouse, then you don't need to pay for anything. You call Philips and say, look, I need a repair. Bring me new equipment. And Philips is going to do this for you. So this is a very short introduction of circular economy aspects. I hope that you like it. We will deliver a training course with much wider detail on this. This was a little snapshot for you to have an idea of what circular economy and circular value chains look like. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Lewis. Participants, if you have any question, please write it in Q&A box, and Lewis is going to answer them. We are taking 2-3 minutes, Lewis. Let's wait, and then we can answer that. I think we have some questions. Can you access them?
Yeah, I see one question from Taha. Hello, Luis. You explained it really well. Thank you very much for the comment. I just have one question. Waste is one of the biggest challenges in Southeast Asian countries. What measures should be taken by both manufacturers and consumers to help reduce waste and support a more circular economy? Well, Taha, this is the question that drives one full module of the upcoming course. So there's no quick or straightforward answer. I would say I would divide this answer into two. One is demand-driven consumer, and the other is producers. So consumers, typically there's a 9R principle. You remember that a few years back, even today, we had this 3R principle: reduce, reuse, recycle. Now we got up to 9Rs. The first one being rethink. So the first question for a consumer is, do I really need this product? So that's the first question. So it's the principle of designing. In a company, I would say the first thing you need to think about is the design process. Can I design this product in a way that can be eco-design, let's say, using less resources? For example, a product that contains less materials, which is simpler, or a packaging that has less colors, or the branding is embedded in the package and not printed in a slice. And even some yogurts now, there are some German yogurts that have a label that can be disassembled very quickly, and then you can take out the paper, which is made of paper, not plastic, because paper is more easily recycled, and you can put it in the paper bin. And then you have only two materials, paper and plastic, which is usually PET or PP. So the less complex the product is, the easier it is to disassemble and to recycle. So design is a very important part of the process. First of all, you need to make the least use of resources as possible, and then you need to think about the end of the lifespan. How easy this product is going to be disassembled and recycled. Let's make not the product super complex. Okay, that would be maybe two of the 9 R's that I would stress today. And I think you had another question. For a company with limited budget, what are the first practical steps towards building a circular supply chain? Okay, good question. I get this question asked a lot. Start with the low-hanging fruit. Typically, it would be energy consumption, especially if you're based in a country where energy bills are high. I work a lot in Peru. I get this question asked a lot. I also work in Asia. So the more energy efficient you can be, the cheaper it will be your energy bill, and that will be a quick win for you. So you will save some money. For example, installing solar panels, it's become easier and easier and cheaper. So if you install solar panels, depending on your facility, if it's a big facility, maybe you will cover only 20-30%. If it's a smaller facility, you might cover up to 50-70% of your energy needs. But with this, you will save some money that you can reinvest in other applications like waste management, etc. So that would be my question to that, my answer to that question. Shahad Salem has a question. For which countries the circular supply chain and waste reduction is mandatory? I would say in Europe, is not labeled maybe as circular exactly, but it's circular related. But for example, in Europe, there are many bidding public procurement processes in which circular requirements, and maybe they are not called circular and they're called environmental. But for example, in the Netherlands, they do have circular requirements. In Denmark, they have circular requirements. And in Germany, they're working on that. Germany was the first country in Europe to enact a policy on due diligence, which is part of the circular economy. Meaning, if there's a transnational company, German one, that works abroad and has some production, or it's getting some products from abroad, it doesn't mean that you are not entitled to comply with the EU regulations or German regulations, because now you do. So wherever you get some product, some wood from Malaysia, or some cocoa from Ecuador or Ghana, or Ivory Coast, you need to comply with EU regulations. If this product gets into the EU borders, you need to comply with that. And following Germany's steps, and similar things happen in the US and Australia and Canada, following the German steps, the EU launched a big CSRD regulation, which became a little bit controversial, and it's a bit difficult to comply with. That's why they extended the period of compliance by 1 year. So companies are entitled to comply with that next year. Of course, smaller companies have lower constraints, and bigger companies have higher requirements, which is usually what it needs to be. Eduardo, it's nice to meet you. Thanks, Luis. Very interesting presentation. What about the labor cost difference between Western and developing countries? That's a good question. Like in waste recycling, valorization of a specific products might only be economically feasible in developing countries, or this may lead to valorization, waste dumping in poor countries, such as EU has implemented with its non-organic waste for decades. Yeah, that's true, and there are regulations implemented on that. Because there's this even illegal waste export outside the EU. That's something a bit difficult to handle. I'm just working now on an assignment on the ESPR directive on textiles. And in textile business, this is happening. So some textiles is leaving the EU because for two reasons. One, maybe it's not economically viable. For example, in Italy, they have a big recycling hub, which is in Prato, in Florence area. They've been recycling for more than 100 years, so they do have technologies for that. And I know that in India, I heard 2 days ago that 98% of the pre-consumed textile waste, meaning all that waste that is generating during the production of the textile and the garments before it's sold, it's recycled. How amazing is that? I cannot tell you the source, but it means that India is so specialized in textile production that can collect it on the premises, on the production premises, and recycle it in the same process because it's savings for them. But for example, in Prato, I know that they were very interested in wool because the price is higher, and not so much in cotton. But usually cotton is also a part of interest. And wool comes from Pakistan and India because it's separated and the price is paid higher. So there are regulations in place for that. But typically, the biggest advice is prevent the waste before the product is sold. Because once it's sold, it's more difficult to ensure traceability. I have a final question from Mohammed Tafik. Design is the most important part. Sometimes it's too late to make changes. I agree with you, Mohammed. Usually, it's often disregarded. Design is a super important part of the process. When you design a product, whoever is designing, if it's one person or a team, needs to think not only on the inputs that you will need for that and the energy needed, but what's going to happen, how this product is going to be used, and what's going to happen afterwards when the product is no longer used. You need to keep asking the right questions. When you keep asking the team the right questions, maybe the procurement team will be very happy because you will save some money because some products will be using less materials, and then meaning the product will be cheaper, and then your company will be more competitive. And if you can say that product, and you can claim correctly, because then otherwise it's going to be called greenwashing, if you cannot provide evidence that your product consumes less or it comes from organic sources, and if you do, and you label it correctly, then probably you can target and market your product in an upper range of the pricing list, and then consumers, especially in Europe, US, Australia, Canada, and more in other countries, in GCC areas, are going to be willing to pay more. Well, thank you very much for your questions and comments. You've been very kind. I'm not sure if there's any more questions coming up.
Lewis, I think there are no more questions. Since you mentioned multiple times about our training, so I would like to give a brief details regarding that training program. So I'm just sharing my screen. Yeah. So we have an upcoming training program. It's a virtual training. The title is Circular Supply Chain and Waste Reduction. It is going to take place on 14th, 15th, and 16th July. And these are the basic details regarding the training program. It is going to be a CPD UK certified training program. So if anyone is interested, we can send over the detailed brochure. It covers the outline and everything. So yeah. So these are the contact details if anyone wants to note them, or maybe they can just directly write us an email so we can share the details. We have some group discounts available. So yeah, definitely this is a much needed training for manufacturing and supply chain professionals. And with this, I am ending the session. Lewis, thank you very much for the amazing webinar. Also, I would like to mention that the recording of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel, so people can watch it later as well. And the training is, we have just limited seats for this training, so I would request everyone to share with your colleagues as well, and just get it registered. It's very cheap, it's not expensive, and it's on a more comfortable virtual format. So definitely you can join. And yeah. So thank you for your participation. Thank you, Lewis.
Thank you,
care.
colleagues. It's been a pleasure, everybody, and I hope that to see some of you in the course, and we will get into much more detail of what I explained today. Thank you very much for your attendance today.
Thank you, Lewis. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Sana. Thank you, Sofia.